Good morning, everyone. I am Leia Constantino, and our team will going to discuss the Module 6 entitled Obtaining Affordable Housing. From our previous discussion, we identify whether a car is a need or a want, and we come up that a car is an example of want because it is only a desire and people can live without it. Next po. Today's discussion is all about housing. So we can indeed say that a house is a need rather than a want because it is essential for survival. Moreover, it is included in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so we must take consideration on how to handle it. Next po. In the future or even today, I know some of you are torn between renting or buying a home. And I think it is normal because it is part of maturity and living a life. So, ano nga bang mas maganda? Umupa or bumili ng bahay? Next po. Renting or buying a home is a major decision that everyone has to thoroughly process in some point in time. Before embarking in the journey, take into consideration some factors such as lifestyle, financial situation, and employment. Next po. Here are the detailed factors you need to consider to make a better decision and sway the answer to one side or the other. First, motivation. Buy if you want to put down roof, start a family, or etc. Yung pagbili kasi ng bahay is a lifelong commitment. Hindi ka naman pwedeng weekly bumili, well, unless mayaman ka. So, buy if you want to start a family. And if your only reason to purchase a house is to get rich, kung gusto mo lang ng may mauuwian or matutulugan after work, then stick to renting. Second, money. Buy if you have the capacity to pay. If you buy, it requires more money upfront. Typically, at least 20% of the asking price is needed for a down payment. And alam naman nating may kamahalan ng pagbili ng bahay, so kung wala kang pera, then rent because it often requires a smaller fixed amount each month. Next, savings. Buy if you'll have emergency savings left over after making a down payment. As what I've said, buy if you have the capacity to pay. Hindi naman pwedeng nakabili ka nga ng bahay, wala ka namang makain. Wala kang pambayad ng bills, so nonsense din. Pinang-display mo lang yung binili mo. Then rent if putting together a down payment would drain your emergency fund. Sabi nga, you must at least allot money for 3 months emergency fund. Hindi naman masamang mangupahan, at least may savings ka. Fourth, risk. If you buy, homeowners have financial risk, both from economy and the home itself. Once you buy a home, part ka na ng association sa lugar nyo. Then, the risk of it is, you are obliged to follow, be updated to the homeowner's project, and do the other errands. So, what if na lang kung busy kang tao, diba? And, yung risk naman kapag nangungupahan ka is, your landlord can spike you anytime. Or could sell the building forcing you to move. And with that, wala kang magagawa kundi umalis na lang kasi it's not even your property. Next po. Next, reward. A home is a hard asset with the potential to provide emotional and financial security into the future. Asset as well as investment kasi yung bahay. Sabi nga, ang bahay ay buhay. So, you are secured enough kung may sarili kang bahay, yet kung wala naman, and nangungupahan ka lang, you have the ability to move freely. Pwede kang lumipat whenever or wherever you want. Next, taxes. When you buy your home, the only tax deductions on a home purchase you may qualify is the prepaid mortgage, such as appraisal fee, attorney's fee, and titles fee. While when you rent, lahat ng taxes is paid by your landlord or the owner of the house. Lastly, keep in mind that when you buy a home, lahat ng sira sa bahay mo, ikaw yung mag-aayos. Ikaw at ikaw lang yung liable. Pero kapag nangupahan ka, lahat ng sira sa bahay like gripo, pinto, or whatsoever is covered by your landlord. And wala kang gagastusin ni piso to fix the said home repairs. Next po. So, who pays more? The renters or the owners? Well, it has two pictures. First, based on cash flow, renters appears to win. Renters generally pay out less money in terms of annual cash flow. When you rent kasi, the real estate taxes, housing fees, and maintenance is covered by your landlord. So, sa housing fees and maintenance pa lang, talo ka agad when you buy a new home. Next, after taxes and depreciation, owners usually win. Owners receive annual income tax advantage and they usually see increases in the value of their homes over time. As like as land, habang tumatagal, tumataas din yung value ng bahay. So after they finish paying for taxes and depreciation and plan to sell their home eventually, the cost of it is much higher than when they bought it in the first place. In conclusion, buying or renting a home depends upon a personal outlook and the financial status of every individual. That's all for my discussion. Thank you for listening.
So, good morning everyone. I'm Maria Kaylin Mangi and I'm going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of renting or buying a house at the current time, which is the time of pandemic. And also, what we gonna choose between the two after 5 years or within the 5 years. The first reporter already discussed the difference between the two, and now we will proceed on its advantages and disadvantages. So the first question in our activity is, what do you see as the advantages and the disadvantages for you of renting or buying housing at the current time? How might your feelings change in the future, such as within 5 years? Here are some of the advantages and disadvantages of renting or buying a house during the current time. So first, let's discuss about the advantages and disadvantage of renting a house at the current time. First one, it is cheaper than buying a house. So renting a house is cheaper than buying a house because you only think about the monthly rent expenses and there are no maintenance costs or repair bills. When you rent a property, your landlord is responsible for all maintenance, improvement, and repairs. So basically, kapag lumipat ka sa isang bahay, handa na yung bahay na titirhan mo. Ang gagawin mo na lang is maglipat at magbayad ng down payment na good for 2 or 3 months. Next is less responsibility. Being a renters, they are not responsible for the preservations and maintenance of the property. But if you're a tenant, you do have to be concerned about causing any damage to your landlord's property. But hindi ka accountable na i-maintain yung structure ng building or yung mga fixtures na meron dun sa isang bahay. Next one, it is easier to move. Renters can live anywhere they want and they can move out anytime they want. but then it should be agreed upon under the list of agreement. So kapag ayaw mo na dun sa tinitirhan mo, pwede kang umalis anytime you want. And lastly, more choices. When you rent a house, you're not restricted to one area lang. Pwede kang maglipat-lipat sa lugar na kung saan mas komportable ka. And also, yung mga tenants is mas preferred nila yung location na kung saan pwede silang magtayo ng mga stores na pagkakakitaan nila, unlike dun sa mga bahay na tago at the same time is hindi pa maganda yung quality, kaya marami silang choices na pwedeng pagpilian kapag lilipat sila sa isang bahay. Next, we have the disadvantage of renting a house at the current time. First, you are bound by the rules and obligations in your lease agreement. Pag sinabi natin lease agreement, it is a legally binding contract between the landlord and the tenant that outlines the terms by which the tenant can rent property from the landlord, such as the durations of the lease, the monthly rent amount, and the maintenance responsibilities. So, kapag gusto mong rent ng isang bahay, you need to comply all the rules and obligations under the lease agreement. Next one, the property can be sold. The owner has the right to sell her or his property anytime he or she wants. So, yung tenants don't have a right to complain if the owner wanted to sell his property. Next one is the monthly rent payment will likely continue to rise due to inflations. Yung pag-increase ng rental rates is one of the most noticeable effects of inflations. Due to the high cost that comes with mortgage, most people will likely to rent rather than buy. So the high demand for rental properties will command the landlords to raise the rental rates. Especially ngayon na tumataas na rin yung mga bilihan. Kaya no choice yung mga landlords kundi itaas na rin yung renta nila. And lastly, the limited space. Having a limited space is one of the disadvantages of renting a house because sometimes the space that you rented is not worth the price. Like, for example, renting a condo or an apartment. Wala kayong bayad doon, tapos yung space is sobrang limited lang, nakasya lang yung isang tao. And also, wala kang enough freedom kung gusto mong maglagay ng mga gamit dun sa space na pinagrentahan mo. Dahil nga limited lang, hindi madami yung maiilalagay mong mga gamit doon. Next, let's proceed on the advantages and disadvantages of buying a house at the current time. First one, low interest rates and mortgage rates. If you wanted to buy a house during this time, you can get it at a low interest and mortgage rates because of the pandemic. A lot of sellers will probably lower their prices to make it affordable to the buyers. Also, nagbibigay din silang discount para mahikayat yung mga tao na bumili ng lupa. Next one, lower competitions. Dahil nga may pandemic, there are fewer buyers in the market right now. And based on the research, there have been 35% decline mortgages applications since the first week of March 2017. So it is good to buy a house right now dahil kaunti lang yung gustong pumili at wala ka masyadong kakompetensya. Rent-free. One of the advantages of owning a house is that you don't have to worry about the monthly rent expenses and other miscellaneous expenses. Next one, generate long-term wealth. The main benefit of owning your home is that you can use it to generate long-term wealth. As a homeowner, you can sell or rent out your house to other people to turn your property into an investment. At habang tumatagal, tumataas din yung value ng lupa. Kaya good investment din na magkaroon ng sariling bahay. Next one, you have control over your property. You can do anything with it. You can alter everything, including the interior exteriors, for your needs and wants. Walang mangingialam sa'yo kung ano man yung gusto mong gawin. dahil ikaw na yung mismong may-ari nun. The next one is the disadvantage of buying a house at the current time. First one is the fewer options. If you decided to buy a house at the current time, you will just have fewer options because a lot of sellers will decide not to sell their property at the current time because of the lower interest. Dahil nga sa pandemic, kumababa yung value ng lupa, kaya yung ibang seller hindi na lang nila binibenta. Kaya kaunti lang yung pagpipilian mo kung sakaling bibili ka ng lupa ngayon. Number one is potential financial loss because it is a huge financial responsibility like loan payments, enhancement, maintenance are never cheap. Interest and fees such as associations, dues are always present. Unlike when you rent, your landlord pays for these things. Next one is reselling is not easy when your land is located in flat and earthquake-prone areas. Dahil mas gusto ng mga tao na located din yung bibilhin nilang lupa na kung saan pwede silang magnegosyo. And lastly, requires more responsibility like paying for their own maintenance, renovations, and so on. Lastly, the last question for the number one, how might your feelings change in the future, such as within 5 years? As of now, we decided to rent a house because as what we have learned about the advantages and disadvantages of renting a house or buying during this time, we come up with an idea wherein renting a house during this time is a good idea because it perfectly gives you an opportunity to have home that will suit your budget. Moreover, it is easier for you to move out anytime you want and it will just give you less responsibility unlike being a homeowner. And also, hindi advisable na bumili ng lupa sa gantong panahon dahil nga sa pandemic. Baka yung mabili mong lupa is less quality at hindi mo siya mapapakinabangan in future. But if we are talking about owning or renting a house in the future after or within 5 years, we might choose to have our own house because having a own house can serve as a long-term investment that will help you to generate more income in the future. Aside from that, it offers security and stability that is very important in our daily lives. And lastly, it serves as a reward for your hard work and dedications. That's all. Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am. My report is all about long-term debt. First, let me discuss what is long-term debt. It is a debt due in 1 year or more. It is a key item that appears on a company's balance sheet. In the balance sheet, companies classify long-term debt as a non-current liability. Such type of loans can have a maturity date of anywhere between 12 months to 30 plus years. For an insurer, long-term debt is a liability that must be repaid while owners of debt account for them as assets. Example, bonds. Long-term debt liabilities are a key component of business solvency ratios, which are analyzed by stakeholders and rating agencies when assessing solvency risk. Investors invest in long-term debt for the benefits of interest payments and consider the time to maturity and liquidity risk. Overall, the lifetime obligations and valuations of long-term debt will be heavily dependent on market rate changes and whether or not a long-term debt issuance has fixed or floating rate interest terms. There are different types of long-term debt. First, we have convertible bonds. Convertible bonds are an adaptable financing choice for organizations. A convertible bond offers financial backers a sort of half-breed security, which has highlights of a bond, such as interest payments, while also providing the opportunity of owning the stock. Second, we have lease obligations or contracts. Leases are legitimate and authoritative agreements that put forward the provisions of tenant contracts in land and genuine and individual property. These agreements specify the obligations of each gathering to impact and keep up the arrangement and are enforceable by each. Third, we have bank debt. Bank debt is a long-term liability a business takes on by borrowing money from its bank. It appears under liabilities on the balance sheet as part of all the money the company owes its creditors. Companies use bank debt to pay for long-term assets such as land, buildings, and equipment or to add more, more cash to their working capital to cover ongoing short-term expenses. The details about bank debt and other long-term liabilities are found in the notes to the financial statements included with the balance sheet. Fourth, we have here pension or post-retirement benefits. The benefits that fall within this category are all of the non-cash payment benefits available to employees, including dental, vision care, legal services, and tuition credits. Fifth, we have contingent obligations, also known as contingent liability, an obligation that is not presently fixed and absolute, but which will become so on the happening of some future and uncertain event. A guarantee obligation is an example of a contingent obligation. Under the terms of the guarantee, the guarantor assumes liability for all guaranteed obligations, but its liability to make payments is conditional. In a guarantee, the contingency is typically the failure of the party that is primarily responsible for the payment obligations to make payment. If this occurs, the guarantor's payment obligation is no longer contingent. Lastly, we have individual notes payable. A note payable is a written promissory note. Under this agreement, a borrower obtains a specific amount of money from a lender and promises to pay it back with interest over a predetermined time period. The interest rate may be fixed over the life of the note or vary in conjunction with the interest rate charged by the lenders to to its best customers, known as the prime rate. Advantages of long-term debt. Every company needs funds to run its day-to-day business, buy fixed assets, and for other business activities. Long-term debts give the organization immediate access to funds without worrying for paying it in the short term. Next, we have debt financing provides sufficient flexibility in the financial capital structure of the company. Flexibility in capital structure of the company can be increased by inserting call provision in the bond indenture. In case of overcapitalization, the company can redeem the debt to balance its capitalization. Bondholders are creditors and have no interference in business operations because they are not entitled to both. Last advantage is the company can enjoy tax saving on interest on debt. After the advantages, here are some of the disadvantages of long-term debt. First, we have interest on debt is permanent burden to the company. Company has to pay the interest to bondholders or creditors at fixed rate whether it earns profit or not. It is legally liable to pay interest on debt. Second, we have debt usually has a fixed maturity date. Therefore, the financial officer must make provision for repayment of debt. Next, debt is the most risky source of long-term financing. Company must pay interest and principal at a specified time. Non-payment of interest and principal on time take the company into bankruptcy. Next, we have debenture indentures may contain restrictive covenants which may limit the company's operating flexibility in future. And lastly, only large-scale credit-worthy firm whose assets are good for collateral can raise capital from long-term debt.
In early years of a standard of 30-year mortgage loan, a little as 10% of a monthly payment actually goes toward repaying the debt. As a result, it takes many years for the loan balance to come down to any significant extent. Explain how that affects your feelings about taking on such long-term obligation. At first, we need to answer the question, what is the connection between mortgage loan and financing a home? A mortgage loan can help you to finance a home that you dream of. A mortgage is a loan from a bank or lender to help you finance the purchase of a home. When you take out a mortgage, you make a promise to repay the money you borrowed plus an agreed upon interest rate. So my feelings about long-term obligation is, for me, having a long-term obligation is really stressful. Like for example, financing a house amounting 5 million and it is from a 30-year mortgage loan with only 10% monthly payment. It takes time for you to finally own the house and you need to be financially stable, especially paying the mortgage to avoid conflict or problem. And there is a negative side of it wherein it takes many months or years for you to be able to fully pay the house you need. You need to have more patience and work hard to achieve your dream house. That's all po. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. This is Patricia Nadia G. Fonelas, and I will be discussing the last item of Module 6, Activity 6. Who can help you? What experts could you turn to for assistance during the home buying and loan application processes? What conflicts of interest most concern you? So, these are the experts that we could turn to for assistance during the home buying and loan application processes. It might be a loan officer, mortgage lender, mortgage broker, loan servicer, real estate agents, brokers and realtors, home seller, home inspector, home appraiser, and insurance agent. For a loan officer, it is a financial professional who will determine approximately how much money you'll be able to borrow for a mortgage loan. Mortgage lender, the business person or financial institution that provides the money you'll use to purchase your new home. For a mortgage broker, it might be an individual or an organization that brings together mortgage lenders and borrowers. A loan servicer is an organization that handles the day-to-day management like collecting, billing, and record keeping of your loan. Real estate agents, brokers, and realtors are trained professionals who are licensed to negotiate the sale and purchase of real estate. Home seller. It is the property owner who puts a home up for sale. Home inspector is an individual who provides trained professional opinion of the physical condition of a home and its components and systems. Home appraiser is an individual who provides a trained professional opinion of the market value of a home. And lastly, the insurance agent is a financial professional who provides protection against the risk of monetary loss. So, these are the experts that we could turn to for assistance during this home buying and loan application processes. What conflicts of interest most concern you? In a conflict of interest, a person or organization has multiple interests which relate to a situation, giving rise to a risk that by servicing one of those interests, they will fail to properly serve another interest. Interests are often financial in nature. For example, a person may have a financial interest in a company that pays them, in an asset they have invested in, or in a gift they expected to receive from a third party. Other types of interests include personal, family, professional, business, and political. Conflicts of interest can usually be considered as belonging to one of these three categories: actual conflict of interest, potential conflict of interest, and perceived conflict of interest. So, the conflict of interest that most concern us in home buying and loan application processes is to encounter a double agent or be in a dual agent situation. This generally refers to a situation where the person representing you is also representing the seller. In this situation, the real estate agent is the listing agent and is also the buyer's agent. In this case, your agent is considered to be a dual agent. And because an agent can't hold a fiduciary duty to you and the seller in the same transaction, your agent's role in the transaction is diminished. In a dual agency situation, the buyer's broker can't give you the advice he would have otherwise provided if he wasn't the listing broker. He might not even be able to say to you that the house is wrong for you. He can tell you that the house is priced too high, and he can't give you the advice you might have become accustomed to in other offers you might have placed. So before we will hire an agent or listing broker, we should first understand what the broker or salesperson will do for us if we find ourselves in a dual agency situation. We will talk with the agent about what rejecting dual agency would mean to us and discuss our expectations for the agent to continue to represent us in the transaction. That would be all from us, Team 6. Thank you for listening.